Aloha familia. So today we're going to be answering a question: what is the difference between a film director and a film producer? Now, I get this question a lot being a film director. What do you do? And people often, some of my friends introduce me as a film producer rather than a director. Now, it might get confusing for them, especially because I do both. However, primarily I'm a film director. And so when I'm jumping on board a project, it's because I want to be able to help enhance the directorial vision of that project and give my creative capacity as a director. So just let's start off. There are different types of producers. And so just bear that in mind. So I'm going to break down different types of producers as well. But let's start off with the directing side. So as a director, you are in charge of bringing the vision of the story to life. Okay. So you are fully in charge in terms of how whether it's a play, whether it's a film, whether it's a TV series, web series, music video, you have the responsibility to bring the concept to life from script to screen and to make sure it's in line with the vision that either the writer or producers had from the get-go. So you need to make sure that whatever concept you come up with, or if there's already a concept that is there, you need to make sure that you are in line with everything that they want for the project and you're bringing that to life. And so there's different things that directors do in order to make sure that they stay in line with bringing the vision for their client or whatever project they're working on to life. And I'll break that down in a minute. But overall, directors are in charge of the creative vision of the project from the beginning to the end. They're in charge of the whole process, and their responsibility is to make sure that the project comes out how it's supposed to come out, right? So the director is charged with a lot, because if a film or show or TV series goes wrong, most of the time they're going to come and look at the director and be like, well, what happened here, right? Because you are in charge of every kind of aspect that goes into it. So a director will have an influence, an opinion / they'll definitely have a say on even the team that is used, some of the time, location scouting, casting. They have quite a big role to play. So they definitely want to be able to have input in every single area of production to make sure that they're able to do their job to the fullest. So when it comes to a producer, so there are different types of producer, but overall, as a producer, you are putting together the whole concept, story, film, TV series, or whatever it is that you're doing. So you are in charge of putting the whole project together. So that means finding crew, finding the cast, finding the director and the editors, etc. So you are in charge of making sure you actually have a team that is put together in order to come and put the vision of the project to life, okay? So a producer is the person that goes and sources and finds all of these people that are going to be involved, etc. Now, as I mentioned, there's different types of producers, and it really does depend also on how big the production is and how big the set is. Standard Hollywood, UK, you're going to have more than one producer involved on set because there is different roles that each producer will take, okay? So just before I get into that, I just want you guys to, let's rerun. So a producer is in charge of putting the whole project together, bringing the team together, and making sure everything runs the way it's supposed to run smoothly. A director is in charge of putting the vision of the story together, okay? So let's break down the producers and the different roles of producers. So there are so many different types of producers, not to overwhelm you guys, but if we're going for a standard indie production, and we're going for a very low budget indie production, so that's an independent film, let's say it's a really small team of about 10 people, most of the time you're going to probably find 1 or 2 producers, right? So for example, I did a short film called Small Shops. On that short film, it was a team of about less than 20 people, all women. They brought together this team of women from different diverse backgrounds. Really, really cool project to be a part of. And so within that project, I was the director and there were 2 producers. but one producer who was on set, and she was like the main producer. And so she was in charge of finding the people. So she found me. And so she reached out to me, said, hey, there's a project. We have a writer and we're putting together a team. And so she was the person who found me like 2 years prior. And then 2 years later, we actually put the project in motion. So it was actually quite a long process. But it goes to show that, especially with independent film, when you're raising budgets yourself, when you're working on a small budget, you have to make sure you're meticulous in being able to find the right team with the right skill set, because at the end of the day, you don't have money to redo things. You have to work with the budget you have. So it took a while to put that together. And I think just so she wanted to make sure it was right. And that was a series of like a couple of shorts that she put together for her first production as a producer. And so I really 100% understand why. And also it was during COVID time she reached out to me. So, you know, there was delays that happened, and then later on we ended up doing it and the project was great. But there were two producers on that project, and so they could split the responsibilities. So one may have had a responsibility of finding and sourcing the people. Another one may have had the responsibility of, when being on set, making sure, you know, catering's on time, making sure we're moving from location, and being in charge of, you know, the people that you need to contact for the locations we're doing, work permits, everything that's needed, you know, contracts. So they might have split those roles between them two to make sure that the legalities were also sorted out. And we also had, you know, location, and we had the right team put in place. So if you think about a bigger studio production, there's definitely more producers because they have the money to break down some of the roles that the producers do and make sure that it runs more efficiently and runs more quickly. So on a standard Hollywood set, you will find so many producers, and I don't want to overwhelm you guys. So I'm just going to break it down to like the primary producers, right? So you will find the executive producer. Now, the executive producer is usually the person that has the highest oversight. So they're the person that is able to make the final decisions, mostly because they're putting the money in, or they're in charge of the body that is putting that money in. So usually that is the highest level in terms of the oversight and in terms of making sure that if something has to be changed, and there's a difference in the script and it requires a huge budget change, there will be the role and the person to approve that, right? So the executive producer is all about the money, and they are essentially the people that give the go-ahead for the whole budget. And so any decisions that actually change a big amount of the budget, they're going to have to approve it, essentially. Now, so the producer, so we have executive producer, we have the producer. So the producer, again, as I mentioned, is in charge of putting everything together. And so when I break down the different roles of what a producer could look like, I just want you to understand, like, producer is still, the main producer role is still putting everything together, right? So we have a line producer, right? So the line producer, they handle the physical production and day-to-day operations on set. So they manage the budget, hires the crew, and it just ensures that the shoot stays on schedule. So the line producer is really all about managing the money, right? And making sure that we are within the budget that has been set. So they're just focused on making sure that whatever we've been given, we are in line with that, right? And then you have associate producer. And an associate producer isn't really involved in, let's say, like the money side of the process. Most times they're like an assistant, or they're credited because they've done a favor and they've made a specific contribution. So for example, it could be an associate producer because they found me the person that ended up funding my whole film. And so I'm giving them special credit because they found me my main funders, but they're not actually anyone that's heavily involved in the process or the project. They're just somebody that's done something and a specific contribution to be awarded a special credit. So a lot of the times when you do see associate producer, it is really about just giving due respect to whoever's helps you do something. And most of the time, it's not an active functional role where they're doing something major. But they might be a connection to a source, a major source that helps you with your project. And then we have co-producer. So as I said, the producer's role is putting everything together. So co-producer will just share the main responsibilities with the main producer essentially and just focus on key other areas. So it might be focusing on post-production after the film is done. It might be line management, making sure that, they're helping with conducting anything post-set or on-set and just helping to manage certain roles. So the co-producer is literally helping the producer, again, with putting everything together, and they're dividing some of those roles. And so you have other roles. As I said, I'm not going to overwhelm you guys. You have other roles like developmental producer, supervising producer, and creative producer. So again, these are the roles of a producer is still here. And then all of the other roles are like divisions of what a producer can do. And when you have more money for a bigger budget, you have more people that can have a say and input in what's happening. Because if you're on a set and there's about 1,000, 2,000 people, it's more so having certain producers in place to break down and delegate and have more headspace to do more things. So I don't want to overwhelm you with saying there's so many kinds of producers, but the main idea is that they help with the story process, putting things together, putting the team together, money. So they all have some kind of functional role in that sense. But again, for the bigger sets, creative producer might be the person who just focuses on the story development, right? So they help build the story with the casting and working closely to the director, and just often heavily involved in script revisions and things like that and decisions around that. The development producer would more so be maybe specializing in developing the scripts, sourcing materials and pitching projects, and just works during the pre-greenlight phase of the project. So, before it's greenlit and they're actually allowed to do the project, they might help behind scenes before that. And then you have the supervising producer as well. They oversee, specific aspects of production, often used in like TV, and they may supervise, a writing staff or post-production or, certain particular people on the team that need that supervision. So again, I want you guys to understand. So producer overall is helping again to put the whole story together. Depending on how big your budget is, how big the studio or team is, you might have more roles of producers to help essentially focus on different parts of the story making process. And so, that's a general breakdown of the difference between a director and a producer. So now I've broken down the roles of a producer, I'll go into more of what a director also does. So with a film director, as I mentioned, it's the overall vision, but let me break down the responsibilities that a film director could have. So that includes interpreting the scripts. So just working with the script writer to get the best script to help with the tone of the story, the feel, the structure, visualizing the whole film. So just deciding on the film, the look, the style, including the color, the lighting, the camera, stylization. When it comes to casting, again, as I mentioned, helping to pick the right cast that fits exactly what the film and the concept is about. So they work closely with the casting directors in order to make sure that they actually hire the right people and have the right people come in for castings. You have storyboards and shot lists. So putting together a storyboard essentially helps with putting together how the film or the project is going to be shot. And the director of photography, which is the cinematographer who films the whole thing, the director will work closely with the DOP to make sure that every aspect of the vision comes to life through the colors they decide to choose, for the color palette, for the camera. And so there's a lot of real-time decisions that the director has to make when it comes to scene adjustments, dialogue, or even just blocking. And that's just making sure that there's a cohesive flow when it comes to the actors being on set. So there's a lot that the film director does, and there's intricacies, and I might break down a separate section about what a director does, just so you fully understand the different parts of it. But during the production as well, you have the director directing actors, guiding their performance to make sure it matches the emotion of the scene and what is needed for the overall project. You have, the director collaborating with the crew, just working closely with the cinematography crew. So that's the DOP, the gaffer, the sound team as well, to just capture and make sure that every shot that we've taken, we can review it, we can make sure we've got the right tone, make sure we've got the right thing, and we can move on. And then just, again, maintaining the vision of the whole project. So after the film is shot, the director will then work with the editors, and that's a huge part of it as well, working with the editors to shape the final cut. And I think people negate the process and how much work it takes to work with the editors, because you're essentially in the booth with them every other day, making sure that the flow of the whole story is how it's supposed to be. So the directors usually will sit there with editors for hours and just make sure that you're choosing the best performances of the actors, the best scenes, to make sure the story makes sense and it flows within the original intent of the story. And then again, sound, music, score, building a score for music, or putting, soundtracks together, composition. That is all something that the director is going to be heavily involved in, and making sure that it all runs smoothly, but also making sure that the choices that are made are in line with what it's supposed to be. So they overall are helping with the vision and finalizing the whole film in itself. So I hope that was helpful. Drop a comment if you want any more information or details in terms of what you want more of, and just let me know if there's anything else you want me to break down or explain, and any examples that I can use to also help you. So I'll pop a few, anything that I think will be helpful at the end of this as well.